what a day! What a lovely day!
Alright, let's get going on the Swedges. So, flip the knife around, and I'm going to start at 120, and the reason why I'm not starting at a lower grit is because you're not really taking a lot of material off. At least, that's not what I do. Now, I've made a couple of knives where I wanted to make the top swedge very, very thin, where it really was a true false edge. But it's not really something that I'm big into. I like to use it for just aesthetic purposes, to make the knife look a little bit more dramatic, maybe to reduce some weight on the tip end of the knife. But I don't generally like to get it down where it's precariously thin, where it looks like it could be an edge. So as such, I don't really need to hog off a lot of material, so I can start with a 120. And the trickiest part about the Hellraiser, the way that I'm grinding them now, is to bring that swedge all the way out to the tip without burning up the tip, without making it too precariously thin. And there you see, those are the first passes at 120. I'm almost at the very end of the tip, but I stop it from going all the way there with the 120. I'll bring that out with 400 and 600, or on whatever knife, whatever the final grit is going to be. So for me, I've done the Hellraiser in a couple of different ways, where I would do the top swedges, I would grind first, and then I would do the primary bevels, and then I would bring the bevels all the way up. And I think that looks great, and it certainly worked for a lot of them. The majority of them in the ground that way. But one day I decided, not too terribly long ago, that I wanted to try it in the reverse manner, because I wanted to try to get both of the grinds, the swedge grinds and the primary grind, to kind of intersect right at the tip. I mean, just right dead center in that tip. And also, there were certain knives that I wanted to have a thicker tip, so I would have more control over how high the primary grind goes up, or how low down the swedge goes down at that tip, and how thick it would be at the end. So in experimenting with it, I think right now I have settled on liking doing the swedges at the end, and then very gently bringing that swedge forward a little more with each pass, a little more and a little more, to bring it right up to the tip, and then just stopping. That's something that I do like with my little finger. I bring that very large swedge down into the tip, and I bring the swedge all the way to the tip. I also do that with the advanced tibia. And the reason really that I do it with those is it's kind of dangerous to do it, because you're running the risk of burning that tip up. So it just kind of shows to the collector, to the end user, that I have a good deal of control in my grinding, in my pressures, in my speed, that will allow me to bring that grind all the way to the tip. There you can see the worst part of knife making if you wear glasses. I spend all day having to dry sweat out of my lenses, because they'll completely obscure my vision. The sweat will pool up in the lenses, and they swirl around, you can't see. And a lot of times that'll happen mid-grind, and you're like, shit, I can't see now. I gotta hope I can finish this pass without screwing anything up. Oh man, what a pain in the ass. Let's see how those grinds mate together and see if they came out good. Here you see me very gently bringing that grind out to the very, very tip. And when I get done here, I spend a lot of time analyzing and making sure that every single part of that bevel is as clean as it can be. because as I mentioned in the previous video, it's a source of pride when somebody says, I can't believe how beautiful and clean your grinds are. And that was something I struggled with for a long time. I was able to grind pretty well, but it didn't necessarily mean the grinds were pretty, that they were perfectly smooth, that they had a sheen to them when I was done. And here you're going to get a chance to see that. And I'm always so happy on grinding day if I've had a good grinding day. That is my favorite part of knife making. There are certain parts that you dredge through and go, oh, wish I could speed up this process. This is not a particularly enjoyable process. But for me, grinding is almost like a therapy. I truly enjoy it. Yeah, when you have a bad grinding day, it's the worst part of knife making for sure. That's when you're throwing knives and tools across the shop. But I really, really love grinding. Here what I'm going to do is take the tips of my scales and I'm going to taper them down. One thing, and it's not just a personal thing that I don't like, which it is true, I don't like, but when you start talking to people that are judging, that are actually judging what custom knife makers are doing, whether it be for competitions or to get into certain knife making groups like the Knife Makers Guild or whatever, what you don't want are blocky, flat scale fronts. I put a taper on all of mine, no matter what the forward design is going to be, which my signature that I've created for myself and is part of my brand DNA is this crescent, what I call the Devil's Moon. I taper that. But even if I do a slightly flat-fronted or just angled type of scale front, because a couple of my designs I've done for years in that manner, I still taper them. I want them to taper downward toward the ricasso, downward toward the flat, downward toward the steel itself. It reduces the chance of snagging and chipping the scale fronts, and it just looks better. It looks like it's a complete knife. When you see just the scale fronts are just cut, and they're thick, and they're flat, and they're straight, and have no form to them, it feels like an incomplete knife. And this, to me, is critical. So here I'm just tapering it down to get them down to the thicknesses that I want them to be at the tips. I still don't want them to be too fragile, but I do want them to be more aesthetically pleasing. And then I take that and I remove that harsh line by gently rounding into the scale body. Here I'm going to start the preliminary contouring of the scales. So just bringing it up against the belt and starting with it flat, removing a little bit of material there, and it really depends on how I want the handhold on the knife. A lot of times I like my scales a bit thicker because I want it to feel substantial in the hand. And then just applying pressure as I'm going up toward the top, or when I flip it over and I'm doing the bottom side, applying the pressure going toward the bottom. It's not particularly difficult. It can be challenging to get the symmetry that you need. So what I like to do is I keep the scales together, and what I've been doing lately is taking small pieces of double-sided sticky tape and adhering the scales together with that. Now, it's not a permanent bond of any sort. It's not even particularly strong, but it's just enough to hold them together so I can do this work and I can see what I've taken off on the scale I'm currently working on versus the one I just worked on, and see if I've got the symmetry where it needs to be, instead of doing just one scale at a time and then stopping, putting them together, looking at them and see if they're matching up. It's easier to have them together. And sometimes I can do it with just the hardware holding it together, and sometimes I need a little bit of help. So that double-faced tape really does do wonders. It's the same thickness as Scotch tape. It's not like, you know, that thick type of double-faced tape. It's just a double-sided. You'll see it at the end. I don't know why I'm over-describing this to you. But this is all just preliminary, just kind of getting it shaped. And the finishing work is all going to be done by hand. So I try to get out any facets or divots or bevels or anything that I may do on the platen here. I'll do that with the slack belt a little bit later on, and then I just further smooth it by doing it by hand. And this is my more standard type of contouring on the frames. I still find this to be the most comfortable, the most pleasing in the hand. They're just convexed enough, they're just curved enough to feel like a palm swell, and while there is no harshness around the outer perimeter, there is still a defined edge to it, even though it's softened, so that keeps it from twisting and torquing in the hand under use. This is my favorite style personally with how it feels. Now on some of my models, like the Hellraiser V3 for example, I do Coke bottle shaped scales where it is a flat taper about 2/3 of the way up toward the tips, and then the last third is using the contact wheel and carving out a concave design and rounding it. And everybody's going to have their own comfort zone. Those are comfortable, they feel nice in the hand, but I prefer just a simple contoured scale for my own personal uses. So a lot of the models that I've designed, I've done with that scale set in mind, just for how that's going to feel in the hand. So there I'm just touching up the taper and making sure everything's tapered evenly down toward the scale tips. And not much longer here, and we're going to be wrapping things up. So I do want to thank you guys for watching all 3 of these videos. I've had a lot of fun sharing this with you, and I'll certainly never probably do it again, because it is very time consuming setting up the camera for each and every little thing that you do, and it caused me to forget a few things as I was making the knife. There's things that you're not seeing on video here that I had to go back and go, shit, I entirely forgot this whole process, this whole step, because I was consumed with documenting what I was doing here. So that caused things to take a little bit longer than I would have liked. But I do enjoy sharing this with you guys. I've read some of the feedback from the first 2 videos that I've uploaded. Thank you guys for the words of encouragement and support. The greatest thing about being a knife maker, honestly, is the fact that every single day that you step out into that shop, you're going to learn something new. Every person that you know in the industry that makes knives, you'll learn something new from them. So I'll never stop learning. I'll never feel like I know everything. There's that double-sided tape right there. I'll never feel like I know everything, that's for certain. And I can't wait to learn new tricks and new things to speed the process up, or make my life easier, or create a fancier finish, or do something that makes somebody go, wow, I'm really glad that I chose to buy one of your knives. So here I am doing the hand sanding, the hand finishing on the scales. All I need to do here is, because I came off of a 400 grit belt, I can start with 400 grit. And so 400 grit and 600 grit, and then just a quick few passes with the Scotch-Brite pad to smooth out any errant little scratches that I may have missed. You always do this wet. The sandpaper that I prefer to use, I'm using right here, is the Rhino Wet. I also like Norton's Black Ice. Those are the 2 best that I have found, because they don't build up quite as fast, so the paper lasts longer than your other brands and the cheaper brands. You certainly don't want to go to like your local convenience store and buy sandpaper. You're paying a lot more money for it, and it doesn't perform even half as well. The stuff will last a lot longer. Use the Windex for lubrication, and everything works out great. It's a messy process. What I've done is I've laid down a piece of leather that I use just solely for doing the work on my scales. Because once the leather is wet, it holds the work in place a little bit. It just helps you just a teeny tiny little bit, so you're not putting a lot of pressure on the scales. A lot of times, like something with my Starlight model, I have very, very delicate, very thin sections at the ends of my scales that I don't want to snap and break at the very end of my process. So it kind of helps me hold it in place without applying a lot of pressure. At some point, I will sit down if I ever have the time and make little jigs, little pieces of G10. And I did this in the very beginning when I only made 2 models. I had little pieces of G10 I could lock in a vise, and I drilled pins into it right where the hole locations were, and I could actually put the scale on there and it held it in place. And I could sand the whole scale around it. It was great. Here I am shortening the tubes for my titanium hardware so that the hardware attaches the scale as solidly as possible. I use varying thicknesses in my steels, not a big variance, but a little variance. So I always want to make sure that the hardware is mated properly, that they're actually going to do their job and hold the scale in place. Now here's the last couple of touch-ups. These are 2 new things that I've been doing to the Hellraisers that I'm really only doing to the Mini. Well, the first process here I'm doing to everything. I talked to a few customers in the past that said, hey, you know where your scales kind of drop off and then you have that section between the handle and the harpoon? Yeah, the edge of the steel there can be a bit sharp, and a lot of times I did that for, I guess I had this wild idea that everybody was a bushcrafter and everybody was going to go camping with my knives, and they wanted to use fire starters and strike with it and this and that, and have that harsh edge to do it. I don't know if I was just bullshitting myself because I didn't want to try to do this, or if I really truly believed it. I don't know. But either way, now I'll freehand a quick little 45-degree bevel on there, and I'll gently bring it up into the harpoon. And so that little line that you saw there I drew with the Sharpie, that's just me knowing where the scales start to disappear off of the spine. And I don't want to go any further back than that, because then I'm going to end up with a gap between the steel and the scales. So I'll run that in by hand real quick. First pass there is always kind of janky. It's going to be a little facety and this and that, but that's just kind of setting where I want it to be. And then I'll go back over it with the final grit. Whatever final grit I used on the bevels, I'll end up doing on there. And make a couple of quick passes to smooth it out, make it look nice. If it's done right, you'll barely notice it when you're looking at it. And that's all I want. I just want to barely soften it. And the other thing I'll be doing here in a moment, it has no practical purpose whatsoever for handling the knife, for using the knife, or anything. But I like to take that guard right there, that finger guard, and just kind of put a couple of extra little bevels on it. No real need for it. I did it one day on a knife, I forgot what it was. Oh, the first time I did was the prototype of the Hellraiser V3. And I went, wow, that looks kind of cool, those extra little bevels there. It's an extra little, especially if it was on like a 2-tone knife or something, it'll be a nice little highlighted spot that'll be in satin or something like that. So I liked it, and so I just do it. I put an extra couple little bevels on there. Doesn't take too long as long as I don't screw it up, and I think it looks good. Yeah, it's not one of those things that you're gonna write letters to mom about, but it's a nice added little detail, nice added little touch. Just shows that you're thinking about the design overall and what little things you can add to it. And here we go. Here is the finished product. The edge is on there. I didn't want to bore you with putting the edge on. What I have a little mini grinder that I use basically as a power strop. I keep a leather belt on it, and it helps me do a nice clean strop so that I've got a nice keen edge when it leaves the shop after I've put the edge on it, and that extra little bit of stropping works. So there you can see the uniformed grinds down the bevels. I try to hit as much light in different angles on this as possible to show that to you. And I'm happy with how this one came out. I love the grinds. I love the satin finishes. The hand rub satin on the flats came out nice. That softer, less reflective satin going through the finger choils and around the tang of the handle. Everything just came together nicely as almost a tritone satin finish on this one. I use tie connector hardware. I love Steve Kelly's work. I think I started going with these flat-topped pivots because I like the almost futuristic or at least modern look of them a little bit more, so I've started using those. And there's the light dancing across all of the surfaces, all of the finishes. I like to add a little pop to my carbon fiber where it's still a matte carbon fiber, yet the fibers within it will glisten in the light. It's something that I appreciate. It's less showy. I've done polished carbon fiber. I think it looks great too, but I like this more as an everyday look. And there's the contrast of the Toxic Green G10. And I think it all tied together very, very nicely. This customer has been really great to work with. He has one of my favorite scaphoids that I made, and he wanted to match up the carbon fiber and green that I did on that one, so we did it. And let's see. Oh, look at the light dance across the harpoon there. I think that looks great. Again, it's nice and clean looking without being overly flashy, I think, but I think it's got a little bit of spectacle to it, right? Just a little bit, just enough. Just enough. Now I want to take this inside and show you what it looks like in different lighting. I've noticed a lot of times I'd finish a knife and think it was done, and I'd take it inside to different lighting and go, oh shit, I missed a whole bunch of scratches. I got to go back out there and refinish it. So yeah, experiment in different lighting, knife makers. You'll catch things sometimes that you didn't see before. This is under standard halogen lighting. I have LED lighting in my shop. There I'm just kind of showing where that extra bevel is to soften the edge of the spine. I like how the Mini feels in the hand. I obviously love the full-size Hellraisers, but the Mini just has a nice feel to it. There I'm just kind of showing that while you have a defined edge going around the scales, it is going to be softened so that it's comfortable in the hand. Show that finish again from underneath and that softened forward finger choil. You see the plunges where they meet up. Everything just came out nice. I love the plunges on this. I love the finishing. There's that sheen going across the primary bevel. There's the edge, highlighting the edge a little bit for you. Nice uniform edge. This one's nice and sharp, good EDC sharpness. It'll slice paper beautifully, but it will still cut through other things. Yeah, it's great if you can slice paper and shave hair, but if it won't cut through cardboard and rope and everything else, what good does it do? So I don't do mirror edges because they're useless. I want to have a little bit of toothiness left to it. This has a 600 grit edge that when stropped is roughly around 1,000 grit. It looks nice and shiny, but it's got a little bit of tooth to it. And here is the packaging. I've changed packaging a lot over the years. There is my retro 80s sticker that I now include. There's my Maker's Mark sticker that I include. I really like this suspended packaging. I think it looks pretty cool. If the scales aren't too thick, it will fit in there and stay. There's my COA cards I've used for years, denoting where I make them, that they're made by hand, some brief instructions on how to handle the materials. There's all the info on the blade, my email address, and then on the back it does mark that it's genuine. It is a genuine product. Thank you guys for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it gives you a bit of insight into the work that I do. And while I won't be probably doing this again, it's always a great pleasure to spend this time with you guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.